I first enlisted in the Navy in August of 1958 because I was finishing high school. I didn't want to go to college in the end. I was schooled out. I didn't know really what I wanted to do with my life. I'd been taking flying lessons prior to entering the Navy and did in fact get my private license while I was in the Navy. I was working out at Deer Valley Airport after I got out of the Navy, flying skydivers, doing charter work and some little instruction. And a guy came through there with a helicopter from the Hiller factory. And he was giving rides, trying to sell helicopters to anybody take a ride. So I took a ride in his helicopter. And it was just fantastic. I mean, what a machine that is. I mean, it was really something.
After his first helicopter ride, Frederick Ferguson knew immediately that he wanted to become a helicopter pilot. He enlisted in the Army to take part in the Warrant Officer program and became certified in rotary-winged aircraft. 2 weeks after graduating from the program in May of 1967, Ferguson found himself in Vietnam, a co-pilot with the 227th Aviation Battalion of the 1st Cavalry. Before long, he was in command of his own UH-1D Slick helicopter. In January 1968, at the beginning of the Tet Offensive, Ferguson was on a routine mission when he overheard an emergency radio call that would change his life.
I was given a mission to go south to take some engineers down to where a truck had been ambushed and blown off the road and they needed to clear the road. So I took them down there and dropped them off and was going back north. And we were listening to the radio that one of our aircraft from my company had in fact been shot down. And of course we were concerned about who the crew was and what their status was. And you're getting little bits and pieces on the radio. And when we got up there, we found out that, in fact, a helicopter had been shot down inside the city of Hue, and that there were survivors, and they had taken refuge in the South Vietnamese Army compound, but they were all wounded, and nobody knew their status. 3 helicopters from other units had attempted a rescue and been driven off by the intense anti-aircraft fire. And then the Corps put out the order to stay clear of Hue because the anti-aircraft fire was just too heavy. It was just not survivable for a helicopter. So it looked like the Corps commander wanted to leave our soldiers there. And of course, we don't do that. We don't leave soldiers. I asked my crew if they would go with me on a rescue attempt. And then I set about finding some gunship guys to cover us because I figured that we would have a better chance of pulling this off if we were doing a little shooting back as opposed to just getting shot at. So I found 3 gunships that were not decisively engaged at the time, and those 3 crews agreed to go with us. So we started down low level down the Perfume River as we got in close to Hue. And of course the gunships were right behind me shooting. I mean, we were getting fire from everywhere, boats, buildings. The NVA owned the town. It was their town. We were taking fire from all quadrants, and my gunners were returning fire with their M60s, and the gunships were shooting, suppressing as best they could. And of course, I was concentrating on flying the helicopter and watching the compound that I was going and figuring, and you could hear the bullets hitting the helicopter. So I saw the compound, and that's when I saw the big flagpole in the middle of it that nobody told me about. And I was looking at the buildings and the flagpole, and I figured I just barely had enough clearance to get in there with a 48-foot rotor system. Came over the wall, just did what we call a decel, put the collective pitch down, pulled the cyclic back in my lap, stood the helicopter on her tail. And that's when I found out that there was a lot of dust in the compound. And so all of a sudden I couldn't see where I was going. And I knew there was a flagpole and I knew there was a building, but I had no idea where they were because I could not see a thing. So I just said, well, plant the helicopter. So I planted the helicopter, And as they were loading the wounded, the dust started to clear a little bit. And I had about equal distance between the flagpole and the building with my rotor blades. There was about 2 feet on either side. Now, is that great piloting skill? Is that luck? Was somebody helping me? Don't know. And just as we were loading the wounded on, the first mortar round hit, maybe 10 or 15 seconds after we were on the ground, and hit right by the tail boom and wounded my crew chief. And we're dragging the guys on, and one of the guys in the back said, "Okay, we got them all, let's go." So I started pulling pitch, and of course then as soon as I start pulling pitch, then the dust starts coming up again because I'm kicking all this wind up. And I can't see anything anymore, so I just pulled a whole handful of power, pulled it straight up as I could go. And I just left the nose low, pulled in all the power she would give me and then some, and headed southeast.
Ferguson's helicopter had been severely damaged by mortar fragments, and his gunners had expended all of their ammunition. But Ferguson deftly maneuvered his aircraft back through treacherous enemy territory and delivered the wounded soldiers to safety.
One of the gunships did not make it all the way back to a secure fire base, but he was far enough away from the enemy-controlled city that the crew was picked up safely. My crew chief was wounded slightly, and the other 2 gunships made it back to friendly fire bases. I got mine back to Wei Fubai, where the aid station was, because that's where we needed to go with the wounded. And we got them back there, and then we called maintenance, and they came over and told me what a darn fool I was for getting the helicopter all tore up like that. We got the 5 guys out. You know, you read about this thing when you're a kid, but you don't ever in your wildest dreams suspect that any time in your lifetime that you would ever be thought of to receive this award. You know, I'm in awe of my fellow recipients. And to me, that is the greatest honor, to be associated with this band of brothers. There's a comradeship between people in the military that civilians can't understand. And I don't ask you to understand it, because there's no way you can understand it. And especially in a combat zone where your actions can affect my well-being and my actions can affect your well-being. There's a comradeship there. There's a brotherhood that you won't find anywhere else, that I've never found anywhere else. It needed to be done. If I was there, they would come after me.